Oops. Forgot our wallet again, Belle said, laughing as if it were the punchline to a private joke. Her voice was just loud enough to carry across the table, but soft enough to sound effortless, rehearsed. Daniel lifted his beer. Thanks, Mom. You always save us. The waiter didn't even pretend to hesitate. He placed the check at my elbow, same as always, tucked neatly inside the leather folder, like it was a formality we'd all agreed upon years ago. His glance was quick, professional, but familiar. He already knew who would be paying. I smiled, the same practiced smile I'd used every other time. Polite, painless, invisible. My purse sat in my lap, right where they expected it to be, but I didn't reach for it. How strange, I said. Eyes still on the folder. This time, so did I. Belle's laughter faded, not abruptly, but like music cut too soon. Daniel blinked, confused. For a second, no one moved. The kids were still busy with their coloring menus, unaware of the pause in the air. Well, I added gently, if you need a minute to sort it out, I can wait in the car. I slid my napkin onto the table, pushed back my chair, and stood. My coat was already draped neatly over the back, ready for a quick exit. I hadn't ordered dessert. Hadn't finished my tea. That had been deliberate. I didn't plan to stay long. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Belle shifted in her seat, glancing toward the waiter, who was already stepping back from the table, like someone who'd suddenly realized he was standing too close. I'll see you later, I said, nodding once before turning. The air outside was cooler than I'd expected. I stood on the curb for a moment, hands in my coat pockets, listening to the clink of glassware behind the restaurant windows. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant either. Just still. They'd catch up soon, or maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I knew where this was headed. 3 hours earlier, I had already made the decision. 3 hours earlier? I was already seated when they arrived. I'd asked for a booth by the window somewhere quiet where I could see the parking lot and not feel boxed in by noise. The hostess didn't question it. I suppose I looked like someone who liked routine. Belle had picked the place some new spot downtown that served lobster on slate tiles and cocktails with sprigs of burnt thyme. Everything on the menu had at least 2 adjectives. Everything on the bill would have at least 3 digits. They were 15 minutes late. Belle swept in first, wearing something expensive and pretending it was casual. Daniel followed, distracted, phone in hand. The kids trailed behind, already arguing over who got to sit by the window. No one apologized. Hope you didn't wait long, Belle said, sliding into the booth without making eye contact. I smiled. Not at all. The waiter came. They ordered confidently appetizers for the table. 2 cocktail steak scallops, something truffle dusted. I asked for lemon chicken and water, no ice. I'd checked the prices before I came. It had become a habit these dinners I didn't ask for at places I wouldn't have chosen, with bills I never saw until I was signing them. Somewhere along the line, my role shifted from guest to sponsor. They treated it like tradition. I treated it like erosion. Mom, you should try this sangria, Daniel said, nudging his glass toward me. I'm fine, thank you. I watched them eat. I watched them laugh. I listened to Belle's complaints about daycare fees and Daniel's frustrations with work. I nodded in the right places. I asked follow-up questions. I smiled when the kids showed me their coloring pages, but I didn't take out my wallet. Not this time. I sat with that quiet for a while. Long enough to decide. Then I folded my napkin, set it on the table, and waited for my moment. It came quickly. Back home, I slipped off my shoes, turned on the kitchen light, and laid my purse on the table. The house was quiet, steady, no voices, no demands. Just the faint tick of the wall clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. I made a cup of weak tea, let it cool beside me, and opened my phone. The seafood place had already processed the charge, $61,245. So, their solution was to use my emergency card. And it turned out they hadn't forgotten their wallet at all. It hadn't even taken 2 hours. I scrolled down. 3 days earlier, $320 transfer to Bell Groceries. Last week, $190 to a vet clinic across town. Their dog, not mine. 2 weeks before that, $480 to a spa Belle liked to call essential for her migraines. She'd sent the request with a winking emoji and the words, "Mama, you're a lifesaver." Every line of it was still there without apology, without repayment. I stared at the screen, then opened my laptop and pulled up the file I hadn't touched in months. Maris_family_expenses.xls. It opened like a familiar ache. Each row a favor. Each column a quiet yes. Car repairs, school supplies, cell phone bills I no longer used but still paid. The spreadsheet was neat, color-coded, complete. And not once had anyone asked me how I was managing it all. I scrolled to the bottom, found the first empty cell, and typed slowly. March 28th, dinner, 5 people, not reimbursed. I formatted the font to match the rest. Pressed save. The cursor blinked at me. It wasn't the money, not entirely. It was how easily I'd been folded into the background. The way they handed me the bill without flinching. The way the waiter knew it would be mine before I even opened my mouth. A week before the dinner, Daniel sent a message that arrived without warning or warmth. Car repairs urgent. Can you cover no greeting? No explanation. No, please. I read it twice, waiting for the rest of the sentence to appear. It didn't. I set the phone down, finished rinsing my mug, and stared out the kitchen window until the kettle clicked off on its own. I paid it that afternoon. I didn't even tell him I had done it. I never did. The confirmation email went into a folder I labeled household because I still hadn't created one just for them. I told myself I would later. I always told myself that. 2 days after that, my electricity bill was higher than usual. I assumed it was a mistake until I logged into my account and saw a second address listed under my name. Not mine, theirs. I scrolled confused. Then realized what had happened. Somewhere along the way, I had agreed without noticing to cover 1 month that turned into several. I went to the public library because I didn't trust myself to do it at home. I needed the distance. I sat at a computer for 4 hours resetting passwords, calling customer service lines, listening to hold music that repeated every 90 seconds. Each time I confirmed my identity, it felt like I was proving something. I shouldn't have had to. When I finally removed the automatic payment, the screen refreshed and went still. No alert, no acknowledgement, just the absence of a link I hadn't realized was there. That night, Daniel texted again. Thanks. Nothing more. They hadn't stopped because I said yes too often. They'd stopped because I never said no at all. Somewhere between the first favor and the 100th expectation replaced gratitude, and silence did the rest. I set my phone face down on the table and opened my notebook. For the first time, I didn't write numbers. I wrote a sentence I hadn't allowed myself to think until then, and when I finished it, I folded the page carefully and slipped it into my wallet for the next time I saw them. I wrote the words out slowly like they belonged to someone else. I used the back of a grocery list, then rewrote them on clean paper once I had the phrasing right. I've been covering more than I should. I love you, but I need balance. I read it aloud once, then again. My voice sounded thin the first time, steadier the second. I tried different tones, softer, firmer, casual. None of them felt quite right, but I kept going until I found one that didn't shake. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and held the note at eye level. I read it as if I were talking to someone I respected, not someone I feared upsetting. My reflection didn't flinch, but I saw the tightness in my shoulders and the way I kept smoothing my shirt, even though it wasn't wrinkled. I changed a word. Balance became boundaries, then back again. Eventually, I folded the paper twice and slid it into the card slot of my wallet. I left it there snug and quiet, not to be dramatic, just to be ready. That night, I turned off the lights at 10 o'clock and lay in bed with the ceiling fan ticking above me. I didn't fall asleep. My mind paced. I thought about everything I wouldn't say, the parts one would cut for their comfort. I thought about how quickly Belle changed the subject when I brought up needing to get my brakes checked, how Daniel had once asked if I really needed to keep my own car. I thought about the spreadsheet, the list of favors disguised as family traditions, and I thought about the envelope already waiting in my coat pocket. At 2:17 a.m., I got out of bed and made a cup of tea I didn't drink. I stood in the kitchen in silence, palms flat on the counter, breathing in the quiet. The tea cooled untouched. When the clock read 3 o'clock, I finally walked back to bed. In the morning, I chose a different coat, the one with the inside pocket, and moved the note. They picked the place again, something trendy with mood lighting and hand-painted menus that didn't list prices. The kind of restaurant that felt curated, not cooked in. Belle arrived first, swinging a new purse in soft leather and kissing the hostess on both cheeks like they were old friends. Daniel followed his watch, catching the light as he checked the time without urgency. The kids came in last, already arguing about dessert. I was already at the table. Belle kissed my cheek. So glad you could make it. I told Daniel we needed some family time. I smiled and nodded. It's good to see you all. When the waiter came to take orders, I waited until the rest of them finished listing appetizers and substitutions. Just the lemon chicken for me, I said. Then lowering my voice slightly, I added. And could I get a separate check just for mine? The waiter didn't flinch. He nodded and wrote it down. No one noticed. The conversation moved on to school pickup complaints and Daniel's latest frustration at work. I nodded at the right parts. I sipped water. I ate slowly. Halfway through the meal, Belle reached across the table to snap a photo of her wine glass, the restaurant name in the background. Daniel was explaining something about a potential promotion, punctuating it with vague numbers and the phrase, "If they'd just let me take the lead." I didn't say much. I didn't need to. I just watched. When the plates were cleared and the kids began asking about dessert, the waiter returned. 2 check folders in hand. One was placed at the center of the table, the other neatly at my elbow. I opened mine. $37 even. I'd brought exact cash. I counted it out, folded the receipt, and slid both toward the edge of the table. This is for mine, I said quietly, already reaching for my coat. They hadn't looked up yet. The check in the middle still lay untouched. I stood adjusting the strap on my purse and stepped back from the table. Behind me, the server hovered in silence, still holding a pen. Silence landed at the table like a dropped glass. Not loud but sharp and impossible to ignore. Daniel looked up from the check. His brow furrowed not in anger but confusion, as if the script had suddenly changed lines without warning. "Wait, you're not covering?" he asked, halving. I slipped my arm into the second sleeve of my coat. "I've paid for mine." Belle blinked. "Oh, I mean we just assumed I know," I said, smoothing the collar. Daniel shifted in his seat. "It's not a big deal. I just didn't bring my wallet." Of course, he hadn't. Belle reached for her phone, frowning at the screen like it had betrayed her. "Let me check our balance." "I think we can." "You'll sort it out," I said gently. "Enjoy the rest of your night." I stepped away from the table before the next excuse could form. Behind me, I could hear the faint rustle of them scrambling. Belle whispering, Daniel swearing under his breath, the clumsy sound of a purse zipper opening too fast. The door to the restaurant let out a soft chime as I pushed it open. Outside the air was crisp. I exhaled and felt the weight of it leave me. Not just the dinner, but the months, maybe years of pretending not to notice how easily I had become their safety net. I didn't look back. The sidewalk was damp from an earlier drizzle. My car was parked 2 blocks away, and for once I was grateful for the walk. I needed the space, the stillness. I passed 2 couples headed toward the entrance, laughing arm in arm. Their voices faded as I turned the corner. By the time I reached the car, I could already picture them splitting the check, doing the math, figuring out what to do without me at the center of the equation. I drove home without the radio. The house was dark when I arrived, exactly as I'd left it. I hung my coat, poured a glass of water, and opened my laptop. No one called that night. I left my phone on the kitchen counter screen, down, volume off. I made toast. I didn't eat. Sat at the table in silence. And watched the clock slip past midnight without a single buzz or ping. It didn't surprise me. They didn't know how to respond without a prompt. The next morning, my phone lit up at 8:12. What was that? Just those words from Daniel, like the night before had been a glitch in the system he expected me to maintain. I stared at the screen for a while, then typed back slowly. A change. That was all. No follow-up came. I opened my banking app. The linked credit card I'd added Daniel to last year just in case was still active. I tapped into settings and removed his access. It took less than a minute. After that, I logged into the utility account. The auto payments for their house had been running from my checking account since the fall. I canceled them all. Then the grocery app, recurring deliveries to their address tied to my card. I stopped those, too. I even changed my password. When it was done, I closed my eyes and breathed. There was no satisfaction. Just air, just quiet. Back at the table, I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. No template, no categories, just a clean page with a name at the top for me only, XLSX. In the first row, I entered the date and wrote breakfast. 1 slice of toast, no cost. It was small, but it was mine. I saved the file. Then I stood up, got dressed, and drove to the post office. I needed stamps. While I waited in line, I saw a flyer for a community ceramics class posted on the bulletin board. I took a photo of it without thinking. Back home, I put the phone on the charger and brewed a fresh pot of tea. The good kind, the one I always saved for when guests came over. This time I poured just 1 cup. Belle showed up the next afternoon, standing at my door with a tight smile and sunglasses still on. She didn't call ahead. She never did. I was in the area, she said. Like that explained everything. I nodded once and stepped aside. She sat at the kitchen table like it was still hers to take, smoothing her skirt and glancing around as if trying to decide how much of the room had changed since her last visit. I moved slowly, deliberately, filling the kettle and setting out 2 mugs, the good ones, white porcelain with blue trim. I didn't ask what kind she wanted, I just made the tea I liked. You could have just told us, she said after a pause. There was no need to make it weird. I stirred a spoonful of honey into my cup. It didn't feel weird to me. Belle shifted. Daniel's confused. He's not angry. He just didn't expect. She stopped short and tried again. You've always helped. It's just what we do. I nodded. I know. She blinked at that like she expected resistance, maybe even guilt. I gave her neither. The silence stretched. She didn't drink her tea. I didn't fill the space. After a few more stalling glances and a check of her phone, she didn't need to make. Belle stood up. Well, I should get going. I walked her to the door, but didn't linger. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. I closed the door gently behind her and stood there a moment, waiting for something to stir in me. Relief, regret, anger. Nothing came. Later that evening, I sat at the same kitchen table and opened my notebook, the same one used for grocery lists and passwords. I turned to a blank page and wrote one line across the top. They're not upset. I stopped. They're upset. I meant it. I capped the pen and placed the notebook next to my tea. Then I opened my laptop and found the photo I'd taken of the ceramics flyer. The email address was blurry but legible. I typed it carefully into a new message and hit send. The ceramics class met on Tuesday evenings in the back room of the community center. The walls smelled faintly of clay and vinegar, and no one asked what I used to do. That felt like its own kind of gift. I signed up without overthinking it. Just filled out the form, wrote the check, and dropped it off at the front desk. The woman who took it smiled and said she liked my handwriting. I wrote that down later, not because it mattered, but because it did. 2 days later, I booked a weekend in Etoria. A small Airbnb above a bookstore with a window that looked out over the marina. No agenda, no one else's schedule, just a quiet kitchen and enough space to think in full sentences again. I bought a used bicycle from a man on the east side who had recently downsized to an apartment. It wasn't elegant, but the tires held air and the bell worked. He helped me load it into the trunk, and I rode it around my neighborhood that same afternoon. I hadn't realized how stiff my shoulders had been until I felt the wind hit my face. Each purchase went into a new tab in my spreadsheet. Tab name for me. Line 1, Community Ceramics, $120. Line 2, Airbnb Etoria, $274. Line 3, Saturday Breakfast, $9 paid in full. No notes, no explanations. Just clean lines recorded clearly like any other investment. I didn't tell Daniel or Belle about the new tab. I didn't need to. I wasn't hiding anything. For the first time in a long time, I felt the difference between removing myself from something and stepping into something else. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just choosing differently. Choosing what filled me instead of what drained me. Choosing what gave back instead of what quietly disappeared. They hadn't called again and I hadn't reached out. I thought about them sometimes, mostly in the evenings, in the quiet between dinner and dishes. I wondered if they'd noticed the silence growing between us and what they thought it meant. But I didn't chase the answer. Instead, I added one more line to the spreadsheet, saved the file, and shut the laptop.